My name is Caleb Vance, the sole heir to the Vance Corporation. That title was etched in my bones the day I was born. On my 18th birthday, my father slid a debit card across his desk toward me. It was linked to a trust fund with an 8-figure balance. His tone was as casual as if he were commenting on the weather. "Here's some spending money," he'd said. I took it. I didn't feel anything special. Money was never something I had to think about. It was like the air I breathed, omnipresent and taken for granted. Until I met Julia. It was at the freshman convocation. She was on stage, the student representative, dressed in a simple white dress, the kind of white that was so clean it was almost sharp, even if you could tell it had been washed 100 times. Her voice was as clear as a mountain spring as it filled the auditorium. College is more than a temple of knowledge. It's a sanctuary for the soul. It's here that we hope to find a truth not wrapped in materialism. Most of the students around me were scrolling through their phones or whispering about the latest luxury drop. I should have been one of them, but for some reason, I listened to her entire speech. "What a phony," sneered Mason Hayes, my childhood friend and the son of a real estate mogul, from the seat next to me. I didn't answer, my eyes following that white dress as she walked off the stage. There was something about the way she walked, her back ramrod straight, as if no storm could ever bend her. I later learned her name was Julia Reed, an English major. Her parents were high school teachers. I started pursuing her with every tool in my arsenal. I'd be waiting outside her lecture hall every day with a bouquet of Ecuadorian roses so large it nearly hit her. I booked out an entire 3-Michelin-star restaurant just to have dinner with her. For her birthday, I had a helicopter descend over the campus athletic field, a 60-foot banner unfurling behind it. "Julia, be my girlfriend." She turned me down again and again. The reason was always the same. "Caleb, we're from different worlds." "Then tell me what the same world looks like," I finally asked, my patience wearing thin. She looked me dead in the eye, her expression completely serious. "A world where you don't have to use money to prove you love someone." I laughed. I found her naivete charming. Money wasn't a tool for proving anything. It was just my life. The turning point came on a rainy night. I'd waited for her outside the library until 10. I saw her walk out, clutching a stack of books without an umbrella. The rain quickly soaked her white shirt, outlining the sharp blades of her shoulders. I drove my car slowly behind her and rolled down the window. "Get in. I'll drive you back to your dorm." She shook her head and kept walking. I finally pulled over, got out of the car, and grabbed her by the wrist. "Do you hate me that much?" Rain dripped from the ends of her hair, and her eyes seemed to burn in the darkness. "I don't hate you, Caleb. I hate the way you treat the world. You think everything can be solved with money, but some things can't." "Like what?" "Like love," she said, her voice soft, but every word hit me like a stone. In that moment, I felt a sudden, sharp desire to see her world, the one where you could live perfectly well without money. "Then can you teach me?" I let go of her hand and tossed my keys back in the car. "Teach me how to like someone without using money." She stared at me, stunned, as the rain plastered our clothes to our bodies. Finally, she sighed. "You can start by running back to the dorm with me. The rain's getting heavier." It was the first time in my life I'd ever run through the rain. My suit was soaked through, and my handmade Italian leather shoes were filled with water. By the time we reached the entrance to the women's dorm, we were both out of breath and a complete mess. She looked at me and suddenly broke into a smile. It was the first time I'd seen her truly smile at me. Not a polite smile, not a distant one, but a real, genuine smile. "You look like a drowned rat," she said. "So do you?" I shot back. That was the day she started agreeing to go on dates with me. But the dates were completely different. Michelin-star restaurants were replaced by the food trucks parked just off campus. Private movie screenings were replaced by quiet corners in the library. A chauffeured luxury car was replaced by walking side by side down the tree-lined paths of the campus. I found, to my own surprise, that I preferred it. When she stopped seeing me as the heir to the Vance Corporation and just saw me as Caleb, I felt a kind of relief I'd never known before. The day we officially got together, I gave her a necklace. It wasn't diamonds or gemstones. It was a small, star-shaped pendant made from a piece of sea glass I'd found on a beach, something I'd bought from a street vendor for $20. She took it, her eyes shining. "This is the best gift I've ever received." I kissed her then, under the old sycamore trees on the main quad, as other students walked by, catcalling good-naturedly. In that moment, I truly believed what she had said. Some things money can't buy. The days that followed were the most ordinary of my 20 years, and also the most extraordinary. Julia's desire for material things was practically non-existent. She refused any expensive gift I tried to give her, but would spend weeks knitting me a crooked, lopsided scarf. She wouldn't set foot in the high-end clubs I frequented, but she dragged me through every second-hand bookstore in the city. She hated extravagant dates, but was happy to spend an entire weekend with me in a study corral in the library. Sometimes I felt like she was a missionary trying to save me from the secular world of money. See, we can be happy without spending a lot, she would always say, her eyes curving into crescents. I played along. I wore the cheap shirts she bought for me on Amazon, ate with her at greasy food trucks, and sat on the athletic field with her, counting stars. But deep down, I was still a businessman. I would subconsciously calculate the cost-benefit of everything, including our relationship. "Can you please not measure everything in terms of money?" she snapped one day, after seeing me calculating the time cost of our dates on my phone. I thought she was being unreasonable. "It's just how my mind works." "But that's not how love works," she insisted. We fought about things like this a lot. She thought I reeked of money. I thought she was hopelessly idealistic. But we always made up after every fight, usually with me compromising first. I started learning to express love with time and attention instead of cash. I volunteered with her at a local soup kitchen. For her birthday, I cooked her a dinner that was so terrible it was almost inedible. She cried, saying it was the happiest birthday she'd ever had. When junior year started, my father officially brought me into the core business of the corporation. I became incredibly busy, and the time I could spend with her dwindled. As an apology, I gave her a supplementary credit card. She refused it. "Love doesn't need to be compensated for." "It's not compensation. It's security, something I want to give you," I said. "Security?" She laughed. "You think money can secure love?" We had another fight. In the end, she reluctantly took the card but told me she would never use it. When I checked the statements later, however, I found that she had. And not infrequently. Clothes, salon appointments, even an expensive floral arrangement class. I didn't confront her. I even felt a little relieved. She was finally bending to reality. The decision to get engaged was sudden. My father said that if I was serious about Julia, I should lock it down sooner rather than later to avoid any complications. I knew what he meant. A family like Julia's would never normally have been considered for the Van Cess. But what could he do? I was in love. I booked the entire top-floor revolving restaurant, hired the best jazz quartet in the city, and had a 7-figure diamond ring custom-made. I wanted to give her a surprise, to prove that I could give her both pure love and the best of what life had to offer. When she received the invitation, she was calm. "Does it have to be so grand?" she asked. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing," I said, kissing her forehead. A week before the engagement party, I took her for a dress fitting. She stood in front of the mirror, wearing a gown custom-designed for her by a Parisian couturier, and she was breathtaking. "It feels like a dream," she whispered. I held her from behind. "It's not a dream. It's our future. If only time could have stopped right there." The world shattered 3 days before the party. I got a call from her. Her voice was frantic in a way I'd never heard before. "Caleb, can we postpone the engagement?" My stomach dropped. "Why?" There was a long silence on the other end. "Leo's back in the country." Leo. The name was like a thorn that had been lodged in my heart. He was her high school senior, supposedly brilliant, the one that got away from her teenage years. He'd gone abroad for college and had fallen off the map. I knew she still had a photo of him hidden in the back of a drawer. I knew she sometimes stared off into space and thought of him, but I never considered him a threat. After all, I was the one by her side. "So he's back, and?" My voice turned cold. I need to see him," she said, her words cautious. "There are some things I need to ask him face to face." I didn't try to stop her. I couldn't have. When she came back from the airport that afternoon, her eyes were red and swollen, but they held a light I'd never seen before. "Caleb," she began, her voice hoarse. "I am sorry. I can't get engaged to you." I laughed, feeling like I was in a nightmare. "What did you just say?" "Leo. He's been in love with me this whole time. He went abroad because of a family crisis. He didn't want to drag me down. Now he's back, and he said he regrets it." She was rambling, but her meaning was crystal clear. I felt the entire world spin. So I choose him." She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Love shouldn't be a compromise, right? In that instant, 20-plus years of civilized upbringing evaporated. I slammed my fist on the table, sending a crystal glass shattering to the floor. The shards scattered near her feet, and she flinched back. "So being with me was a compromise?" I roared. She started to cry, but her tone was firm. "I was happy with you, but it wasn't what love is supposed to be. Real love should be pure, without any complications." "Like money," I sneered. She nodded. The irony was crushing. For 3 years, she had enjoyed the convenience and comfort my wealth provided, all while believing our relationship wasn't pure enough. And now, She was choosing a guy who had to take out loans for tuition, all because she thought that was real love. Get out, I said. She turned as if a great weight had been lifted from her, not even glancing back at the apartment we had shared for 2 years. The first thing I did after she left was cancel all her supplementary cards. The bank manager called to confirm, his voice cautious. Mr. Vance, is this a permanent deactivation for Ms. Reed's cards? Permanent, I bid out. After hanging up, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the sprawling city. It was from this same window that I had decided to pursue her 3 years ago. Back then, I thought there was nothing in the world Caleb Vance couldn't have. Now I knew better. Some things not even I could hold on to. Calls from friends, trying to console me, came one after another. I ignored them all. Mason burst directly into my office, looking at me with exasperation. Is she really worth all this, man? It wasn't about whether she was worth it. It was that I couldn't understand why. A week later, I was back on campus for a university corporate partnership meeting. Walking down a familiar tree-lined path, I ran into her. She had changed. She was wearing a simple cotton dress that was slightly faded, and her once meticulously cared-for hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was makeup-free. She was carrying a stack of books, walking from the direction of the library, and she froze when she saw me. We stood in the middle of the path like strangers. How have you been? She asked first, her voice quiet. I noticed her wrist was bare. The sea glass pendant was gone, replaced by a cheap red string bracelet. Great, I said. And you? Must be bliss, being with your long-lost love. She bit her lip. Leo, he's doing well. I heard he went to some third-rate university in the States, I said, twisting the knife. And that his family had to sell their house just to send him there. The color drained from her face. How did you know that? I smiled. The moment I learned of Leo's existence, I'd have my people do a deep dive. A nobody who had emptied his family savings to get a useless degree he never even finished. Now he was back, working as a clerk in some small firm his parents pulled strings for, making maybe $40,000 a year. This was the man she thought could compete with me? You can live without money, Julia said suddenly, as if to herself, but also to me. Real love doesn't need material things to survive. I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that had once captivated me, now filled with a stubborn, childish naivete. I wanted to laugh. You can live, Julia, but what about your precious Leo? He thinks he's found a meal ticket for life, not knowing that all the shine came from me. I can already see their future, fighting over groceries, stressing about rent, their pure love ground down to dust by the sheer weight of being broke. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded. Good luck. As I turned to leave, I heard her say softly behind me, Caleb, I'm sorry. I didn't look back. Sorry is the most useless word in the world. It can't change the past or fix the present. My driver was waiting by the car at the campus gate. Before I got in, I took one last look back. Julia was still standing there, clutching her books, a thin, solitary figure against the afternoon sun. For a second, I remembered a summer day during our junior year. We had gone to the coast to watch the sunrise. She had leaned her head on my shoulder and said that when we were old, we should watch the sunrise and sunset together every day. Will you still love me then? She had asked. Always. I had answered without a moment's hesitation. She had smiled, her eyes brighter than the rising sun. Now, the sun was the same, but we were not. A few days later, I was stuck in rush hour traffic on a familiar street. My driver, Frank, was muttering about the gridlock while I rubbed my temples, exhausted from days of intense merger negotiations. I glanced out the window and saw an unexpected sight. Julia. She was sitting at a grimy table at a taco truck we'd been to a few times. The plastic chairs were low and greasy, and a single, dim bulb overhead attracted a swarm of late summer moths. Sitting across from her was the man, Leo Carter. I'd seen his picture. He was thinner in person, wearing a shirt that wasn't quite properly ironed. A look of anticipation on his face quickly soured into obvious disappointment. I told Frank to pull over. With the window halfway down, the city noise and snippets of their conversation drifted in. This is it. Leo's voice was laced with disbelief as he looked around, his brow furrowed. I thought you had money. Why are you taking me to a place like this? The contempt in his voice was palpable. Julia's shoulders tensed. I could see her hands clench in her lap. Her voice was low, laced with embarrassment. The food is actually really good here. We used to... Leo cut her off impatiently, his tone magnanimous. Whatever. I am hungry. I guess I can rough it for once. Julia said nothing more, just quietly passed him a menu. The meal was silent and awkward. Leo ate quickly, barely looking up, occasionally wiping the already clean table with a napkin. Julia took small bites, glancing at him from time to time with a pleading, anxious look, only to be met with a distracted nod. When they finished, Leo stood up almost immediately. "Let's go. I have work early tomorrow." He didn't even offer to walk her back to campus. They exchanged a few quiet words by the truck and then walked off in opposite directions. It was clearly not a happy parting. Julia stood alone under the dim light, which highlighted her thin shoulders. Her head was bowed, and she didn't move for a long time. On a strange impulse, I got out of the car. My footsteps were lost in the noise of the night market, but she still looked up as if startled. When she saw it was me, a flash of panic crossed her face, quickly replaced by that familiar, stubborn pride. I walked up to her. The air was thick with the smell of grilled meat and the humid summer heat. I glanced in the direction Leo had disappeared, then looked back at her. My voice was calm, but sharp with a sarcasm I didn't bother to hide. "Is this it? The pure love you wanted? The noble love, untainted by materialism?" Julia's face went white. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Then, she forced herself to meet my gaze, repeating the words from that day, though her voice was shaky. "You wouldn't understand." "You're right, I don't," I said, a humorless smile twisting my lips. "I don't understand why someone would give up a comfortable life just to experience this. This purity of being looked down on." I stressed the last word. She whipped her head away, her voice trembling. "It was my choice. At least this way, I don't feel like I owe you anything. I don't have to feel like all those good times were stolen or borrowed." So that's how she saw it. Our time together, what I had thought were sweet memories, had been a burden to her, a debt. I looked at her profile, at the brave face she was trying so hard to maintain, and suddenly felt tired. There was no point in arguing. She was the star of her own tragic romance, deaf to the voice of reality. "I hope your choice is worth every plain bagel you'll have to eat," I said, then turned and got back in the car. In the rearview mirror, her figure grew smaller and smaller in the hazy glow of the streetlights, until she was finally swallowed by the crowd. I thought that after our unpleasant encounter, Julia and I would finally go our separate ways. But a few days later, as I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, a post stopped me cold. It was from Julia, a carefully composed photo of an elaborate Japanese dinner. Sashimi, sushi, tempura, it looked expensive. The caption was just a sun emoji, an attempt to project a casual, contented vibe. I recognized the restaurant. Dinner for one that would run you at least $200. For the old her, or for me, that was nothing. But for a college student who had cut off her only source of funds, relying on a meager allowance from her parents and whatever she could make from part-time jobs, it was an extravagant, almost impossible expense. A flicker of confusion went through me. How could she possibly afford that? Did Leo pay? Based on what I knew, Leo's salary barely covered his own expenses in the city. He wasn't in a position to be so generous. In the following days, I occasionally saw Julia post pictures of things she'd bought for Leo, a shirt from a mid-range designer brand, a new pair of sneakers. They weren't top-tier luxury, but together they represented a significant amount of money. On her Instagram feed, she seemed to be deeply immersed in the sweetness of a new relationship, using these material details to paint a picture of a decent and happy life. But then, one afternoon after meeting a client at a club near the university, I took a shortcut through campus and saw a different reality. It was lunchtime, and the cafeteria was buzzing with students. Julia was sitting alone at a table by the window. In front of her was nothing but a plain bagel and a cup of free hot water. She ate slowly, taking small bites of the bagel, occasionally sipping the water, her gaze fixed on something outside the window. In profile, she looked incredibly lonely and gaunt. She was a world away from the vibrant person on her Instagram. I stood at a distance, watching. The strange feeling I'd had grew stronger. She was desperately trying to project a lifestyle she didn't have, both to Leo and to the world. The sushi dinner, the gifts, and the girl in front of me, eating a dry bagel, created a stark and ironic contrast. There was something else going on. A bad feeling started to form in the pit of my stomach. 3 months later, late one night, after a long video conference with our European office, my phone started vibrating uncontrollably. It wasn't a call, but a continuous stream of text alerts. I frowned and picked it up. The texts were all from unknown numbers, but the content was sickeningly similar, the language crude. "Julia Reed, pay what you owe. If you don't pay up, we're contacting your school and your parents. Ms. Reed, your loan is severely delinquent. Please remit payment immediately, or we will pursue legal action. Julia, final warning. If we don't see the money by 5 p.m. today, you'll be sorry." There were dozens of them, an avalanche of collection notices. It looked like a payday lender was carpet bombing her entire contact list. Had she really gotten herself into this kind of trouble? After the initial shock, I called my assistant and told him to look into it. The Julia I knew didn't seem like the type to get involved with online loan sharks. The report came back quickly. It was simple and horrifying. To maintain her respectable image in front of her precious Leo, to pay for the dates and gifts that were far beyond her means, Julia had not only maxed out every credit card in her name, but had also taken out loans from multiple high-interest online lenders. With the insane interest rates, the debt had snowballed into what, for her, was an astronomical sum. The most laughable and tragic part was that Leo seemed completely oblivious to her sacrifices. In fact, he had started complaining that she was getting cheap, that she wasn't as generous as she had been at the start. He probably still thought she was just a somewhat frugal rich girl. He had no idea that to feed his pathetic vanity, she had buried herself in debt and was surviving on plain bagels in the cafeteria. Leaning back in my chair, I stared at the report my assistant had sent. I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at her foolishness, amusement at a reality more absurd than any drama, and deep down, a flicker of dark satisfaction. Life moved on, my days filled with meetings, negotiations, and corporate dinners. I would occasionally piece together fragments of Julia's life from things I overheard or from her now silent social media. She seemed to be sinking into quicksand, and the more she struggled, the deeper she sank. I heard that because she was working so many part-time jobs and was mentally exhausted, she had started skipping classes. Her once solid grades plummeted, and she was failing several of her core major courses. The academic probation notice was probably harder for her to face than the collection calls, especially with her salt-of-the-earth academic parents. She was like a spinning top, frantically running between jobs, tutoring, waitressing, working the register at a convenience store. But the meager hourly wages were a drop in the bucket against the compounding interest of her debts. The hole wasn't just not being filled, it was getting bigger. Tragically, even in this state, she hadn't woken up. Or perhaps she was in too deep to get out. To maintain that crumbling facade for Leo, she was still robbing Peter to pay Paul, taking out new loans to afford the next decent date, to buy the next gift that might earn her a smile. It was a desperate, vicious cycle. One weekend evening, I was driving through a commercial street behind the university. It was a bustling area and known for its cheap goods and street food. Amid the chaos, I caught sight of a familiar figure. Julia. She was squatting on the sidewalk, a piece of old cloth spread out in front of her. On it were a few scattered items for sale: hair clips, phone cases, socks. Her head was bowed, her long, unkempt hair hiding her face as she clumsily arranged her meager inventory. When a student stopped to look, she would quickly raise her head, forcing a hopeful, pleading smile, and quietly quote a price. That smile held none of her former pride or idealism, only the weary, humbled look of someone beaten down by life. I parked nearby and just watched. The evening breeze pushed her bangs back, revealing a gaunt face and dark circles under her eyes. The idealist who once claimed, "You can live without money," was now hawking cheap trinkets on a street corner, enduring the wind and the critical glances of strangers, all for a few dollars. She must have felt my gaze because she suddenly looked up, her eyes cutting through the crowd and landing directly on me in the car. The moment our eyes met, she froze. Her eyes quickly turned red, filling with a storm of complex emotions: shame, grievance, and maybe, for a fleeting second, a silent plea for help. I got out of the car and walked over to her makeshift stall. The smell of cheap plastic and fried food filled the air. I looked at her reddened eyes and asked the question that had been lingering in my mind for months. "Do you regret it?" Julia quickly looked down, blinking hard to force back the tears. When she looked up again, her face wore that familiar mask of stubbornness, though it looked incredibly fragile now. She forced a weak smile, her voice hoarse but defiant. "Regret what? I'm doing okay." "Doing okay?" I repeated, my gaze sweeping over the few dozen dollars worth of merchandise at her feet, over her faded jeans and worn-out canvas shoes. She didn't answer, just stubbornly turned her face away, refusing to look at me. The HR department sent a batch of resumes for entry-level positions to my desk for review. In the list of applicants for a security guard position, I saw a name that jumped out at me: Leo Carter. In his photo, he had a forced look of seriousness. The resume itself was pathetic. His time studying abroad was vaguely glossed over. It seemed the glow of being her one that got away didn't do much for him in the actual job market. Without a moment's hesitation, I picked up the intercom and called the director of HR. That applicant for the security position, Leo Carter. Reject him. No explanation given, none needed. It was the simplest, most direct expression of power. I didn't expect that the next day, Julia would be waiting in the lobby of my building. She got the front desk to call up to my office, her voice tight with suppressed rage, demanding to see me. She burst into my office, ignoring my secretary's attempts to stop her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were wide with fury. "Caleb, was it you? Did you get the company to reject Leo? How could you be so selfish, so petty?" I sat behind my massive desk, calmly watching her tremble with anger. "The company has its hiring standards," I said coolly. "If someone isn't qualified, they're rejected." "Not qualified? What kind of high standard is there for a security guard?" "You're just getting revenge," she accused. I couldn't be bothered to argue. I pressed the intercom. "Please escort our guest out." Seeing my indifference, Julia suddenly became frantic. She rushed to my desk, leaning on it with both hands, staring at me. Her tone suddenly shifted, becoming soft and probing. "Caleb, are you doing this because you still love me?" I frowned, caught off guard by the absurd turn. Before I could respond, she clung to it like a lifeline, speaking in a rush. "I'm telling you, Leo and we're not officially together. Nothing's happened. If you still want to marry me, you can help me pay off my debts, and we could consider getting back together." Her words were a desperate, transactional mess. The pure love she had once treasured was now a bargaining chip. I looked at her and started to laugh. "Julia," I said, leaning back in my chair, my eyes sharp. "Are you kidding me?" My laughter made her face flush red, then turn pale. Her eyes darted around, unable to meet mine. "For money, you'd give up your great love? Then what exactly were you chasing when you threw me away?" I asked, each word a lash against her already shredded pride. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She turned and fled my office in humiliation. After that disastrous conversation, I thought Julia would finally leave me alone, but the bigger spectacle was yet to come. Maybe the debt collectors finally got Leo's number, or maybe Julia, at the end of her rope, confessed everything and asked for his help. Whatever the reason, the facade she had so painstakingly maintained was finally, brutally torn down. A comical and pathetic breakup played out for all to see on social media. It started with Leo posting a passive-aggressive Instagram story. Unbelievable. "If you're broke, don't pretend to be a big shot." Disgusting. He didn't name names, but given his recent company, the target was obvious. Then, either triggered by his post, or just completely broken by the shattered illusion, Julia fired back in the comments. "I'm disgusting? Who was I borrowing that money for? Who was I eating plain bagels for? What do you ever do except take? Leo immediately shot back. "Did I ask you to take out high-interest loans? That's your own vanity. Don't blame me. If I'd known you were the type to fake it, I never would have wasted my time on you." They went back and forth, airing all their dirty laundry in a public forum where all their mutual friends could see. It was a vicious, ugly fight. He called her a liar and a phony. She called him a freeloader and a user. The most ironic part, pieced together from their insults, was the clear fact that they had never even been an official couple. It had all been Julia's one-sided, desperate effort. Leo had simply been enjoying the perks of being pursued by a supposed rich girl, and had turned on her the second he found out his benefactor was actually bankrupt. The drama ended with Julia deleting all her comments and blocking Leo. He, in turn, changed his bio to "Don't be fake." The fairy tale love story Julia had constructed, the purity she had gone into debt and ruined her academic career for, had collapsed in the most humiliating, undignified way possible. All that was left was a mountain of debt, a life in ruins, and a reputation as a laughingstock. I thought the social media meltdown was the lowest she could sink, but I had underestimated the madness of someone pushed to the absolute brink. One ordinary afternoon, I was in a board meeting listening to a critical project report when a commotion erupted outside. The doors to the conference room were thrown open, and a figure burst in. It was Julia. She was wearing a white wedding dress. It was ill-fitting and slightly dirty, looking like something she'd rented from a cheap photo studio or bought secondhand. Her hair was a mess, and her face was a twisted mask of exhilaration and despair. She ran straight toward me, ignoring the room full of stunned executives, and screamed, her voice shrill. "Caleb, I was wrong. I see it all now. None of it was real. Only you are real." She waved her arms, the cheap lace of the dress fluttering. "Let's get married. Right now. I'm wearing the dress. We can start over, please." The entire boardroom was silent, everyone frozen in shock. I looked at her, at the ridiculous dress, at the hysterical glint in her eyes. I didn't feel anger or pity, just a profound sense of the absurd. The woman who had once scorned materialism and chased a pure, spiritual love, was now wearing the symbol of that commitment in the most desperate, pathetic plea for the very financial security she had thrown away. I pressed the button on the intercom, my voice as cold as ice. Security to the main conference room. Two large security guards entered swiftly and took her by the arms. She struggled, still shouting, "Caleb, listen to me. I do love you. I was just confused before." Her voice faded as they dragged her down the hall. My executive assistant tiptoed in, her face pale. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, "that woman. Is she mentally unwell?" I stared out the window, watching Julia's figure become a tiny, insignificant as she was escorted out of the building. I looked back at my assistant, and it felt like I was also speaking to myself. She must be. After that grotesque farce, Julia vanished completely from my life. I heard scraps of news about her from old university classmates. Apparently, she had channeled all of her misery, the debt, dropping out of school, being abandoned by everyone, into a single-minded blame for Leo. She convinced herself that his appearance and his deception were the sole reasons for her downfall. Driven by this obsessive conviction, she went to find Leo and demand that he pay her back for her losses. That was like trying to get blood from a stone. A man like Leo would never admit fault, let alone pay. I heard they got into a violent argument. In the process, Leo beat her. Viciously. He beat her so badly, she ended up in the hospital. The injuries were apparently severe, and Leo, with clear evidence against him, was arrested for assault and sent to jail. A twisted relationship that had never even officially begun ended in a mutually destructive implosion. One in a hospital bed, the other in a prison cell. Lying in that hospital bed, Julia sent me one last long text message. Maybe it was genuine remorse, or maybe it was just the last move of a desperate player with no options left. In the message, she detailed how Leo had attacked her, how cruel he was, claiming she finally saw him for who he was and that she hated him. At the very end, she asked, timidly, with a pathetic sliver of hope, "Caleb, it's all over now. Can we start again?" I stared at the words on the screen, picturing her typing them from her hospital bed. I felt nothing, not even scorn. It was like watching the foregone conclusion of a tragedy that had nothing to do with me. I didn't reply. I deleted the message and blocked her number. The moment she had canceled our engagement for her long-lost love, any possibility between us had been permanently severed. Time passed. College became a distant memory. I graduated, seamlessly took over the family business, and grew more seasoned and formidable in the corporate world. I was never without female companionship, usually bright, beautiful models, and socialites who understood the rules of the game. It was mutually beneficial and refreshingly simple. Occasionally, I heard whispers about Julia. She never did get her degree. After dropping out, burdened by debt, and lacking any real skills or qualifications, she was struggling at the bottom rung of society. Her life had lost any chance of comeback. One evening, I was leaving an exclusive club with two young actresses I had just signed to an endorsement deal. They were stunning, one on each arm, laughing and chatting as we walked to the car. As my driver pulled up, my eyes drifted to the street corner. A frail figure was hunched over, digging through a public trash can for plastic bottles and cardboard. She wore dirty, oversized clothes, and her hair was greasy and matted. In the dim glow of the streetlight, her profile looked aged and numb. It was Julia. She saw me at the same moment. As our eyes met, she froze, as if struck by lightning. Her gaze shifted from me to the glamorous women at my side, their designer logos catching the light, and then back to my own calm, composed demeanor. The whole scene was a tableau of everything she had lost. Her lips began to tremble violently. Her eyes filled with an indescribable mix of shock, regret, jealousy, and utter despair. Finally, all those emotions erupted in a gut-wrenching sob. She collapsed onto the sidewalk, oblivious to the stares of passers-by, and wept, a raw, agonized sound, as if she were trying to expel her very soul. All of this luxury, this stability, it had all been within her grasp, and she, with her own two hands, had destroyed it. I watched her for a few seconds, then pulled a few $100 bills from my wallet. I walked over and placed them on the ground next to her tattered bag of recyclables. "Get something to eat," I said. My voice was even, devoid of pity or mockery, the same tone I would use for any homeless person on the street. Julia looked up, her face streaked with tears, and stared at me. Her voice choked out one last, desperate question. "Caleb, do you still hate me?" I looked down at her and shook my head, my voice quiet but clear. "No, I'm grateful to you." As she stared at me in confusion, I continued, "Thank you for teaching me how important money is. It might not be able to buy that pure love you were looking for, but at the very least, it allows a person to live with dignity. With that, I turned and walked toward my waiting car and my beautiful companions. I did not look back. The night swallowed her cries, just as it had swallowed a past that was already long buried.